Hey guys, David Clayton here with GuitarBreakdown.com, and I want to welcome you back to part 3 in this 5-part lesson series we're doing on bending strings. If you haven't seen the other parts and you're watching this on YouTube, click the description below and you'll find the link to watching those other parts. If you're watching this on TrueFire, you know this is part of a brutal and fierce competition that we're involved in, and just click the buttons above and you'll see the other parts to this lesson series. In the last lesson, we did more of a clean tone kind of country bending things. I call them chordal bendings, where it's getting a really cool pedal steel kind of sound. But we got a few comments. We got one comment that was kind of funny, that they were asking why I didn't use a fixed bridged guitar and I used a floating trem, because everything just went out of tune and it sounded horrible. Well, thank you. It did sound pretty horrible, but that wasn't the point. The point was showing the technique. And unfortunately, I don't have a fixed trem guitar, so I couldn't use one. But when I'm showing kind of examples, I mean, they don't have to be perfect, and this is something I tell my students all the time. Have fun with it and just explore, and you don't have to be perfect in pitch all the time, because who cares? We're rock and roll. I've said it a million times, but so that was why I didn't use a fixed bridge tremolo system. Anyway, on this, if you were the guy that asked that question, you may not want to watch this lesson because this is going to go so outside the realm of being in tune, or it's going to be walking the border of being in tune. We're going to talk about more aggressive style bends. And a lot of these bends are more rock oriented, kind of blues oriented, but they're definitely not precise jazz and country type bends. Now, that being said, with everything that we've done, I've always said experiment with this. Always have fun. No matter what style of music you play, use this in that style, and maybe you'll come up with a unique technique that nobody's ever done before. So even if you're not a rocker or a blues guy, you might want to experiment with some of these ideas. So let's get to the ideas now. All right, so for the first technique we're going to talk about in this lesson, if you really want to get in the spirit of this, I advise going in your closet, wherever you hide that old box of clothes, and pull out your ripped pair of jeans or throw on your spandex. And I know you have them, because we all do if we're into rock and roll. But this is going back to the 80s. And there's a guy named Dan Huff, amazing guitar player. He was a huge session player, and now he's more of a producer. But he was in a band called Giant. And they used to open up their concert with this anthem type thing, which was an intro to a song. And it was just so cool. And it just has these aggressive rock style bends. Now, I don't use a lot of distortion and delay, but this kind of calls for it. So if it's a little muddy, I apologize for that. But this is going to be a great, again, it's not a huge technique, or it's not licks or anything. That's not what we're going for. This kind of builds what I call a wall of sound and a mood. It creates an environment and a mood. So this is the way you could use aggressive bends and really get a cool thing happening. So it goes like this. But that is aggressive. I mean, and it sets a mood. And think of that in like a giant stadium, where it's just amazing. Again, it's simple technique. You're just bending strings, and you're just really bending one string. You're holding the 15th fret on the B string. This is basically E minor pentatonic. 15th fret of the B string and the 14th fret of the G string, and you're just bending that 14th fret up a whole step. But again, you're doing it aggressively. It's not just or, right? It's got a lot of gain to it. Even with a lot of gain, if you do it lighter, it sounds cool. But if you really, pick it hard, and what's getting that screaming sound is he's actually gradually bending down. So he bends up, and then he bends down, so you get this really cool scream. Now, the way he actually does the first one, he actually bends the bar into it, and he gets this really cool... It's kind of like the Eddie Van Halen elephant kind of sound. You just get this wide scream. The other thing that makes that whole anthem just sound so brilliant is the aggression in the beginning to sitting on the chords. So you have... So you have this wild craziness going on, and then it's offset by the calm settling of those chords. And that's one thing I don't know if we've mentioned before too. I love that contrast of if you do fast picking stuff, you want to offset it with some slow melodic stuff. If you do this aggressive stuff, kind of offset it with some kind of calm settling stuff. Now, the other thing that's kind of really cool in there, and this is kind of a sidetrack, but that sliding into notes really makes it sound so cool. So, and you're basically sliding up and down. You've got a target that you're going to, but you're just kind of sliding from nowhere. So you can go, say, A minor pentatonic, right? Slide to that 7th fret of the G string. Or you could slide up and then back into, say, the 8th fret of the E string or the B string. Right? It adds to that aggressive nature. So that's one little concept and technique. Now we got a few more that we'll go into, and again, these are all about experimenting with the aggression of your bends. All right, so the next bunch of ideas we're going to go through really quickly. They're, as you can tell, like even the first idea, these aren't lick-based. They're not huge concepts. They're just little ideas of ways to aggressively bend. A lot of times we get caught up in those perfect pitch kind of clean bending to the perfect step and a half, or this half step bends. And this is more about aggression and getting that mood and vibe happening. So we're not focused on perfectly bending in tune, but these ideas are really, really cool. And the first time I ever heard this next idea was from one of my teachers at music school. It was the first teacher I really connected with, because he used to play like Coltrane stuff and Michael Brecker and all this cool jazz stuff, but then he'd incorporate it with this rock stuff, from Hendrix to Van Halen to Warren DeMartini, kind of like what Scott Henderson does and those guys. Like they have a lot of great jazz ideas, fusion things, but they have this aggression to them. So this idea is a real simple concept. It's just bending up a whole step really fast, bending up and down, and then slowly easing back into that bend, and it sounds something like this. Right? You hear that, the real quick cry and wail of a quick bend, and then you just slowly ease back into that. So here we're taking E minor pentatonic. We start on the 15th fret of the B string, bend up a whole step and back down real quick. And then slowly bend back up. And then you can hit the E note on the 12th fret of the E string, because you're basically bending to that E note, then down, then back up slowly, and then you hit the E note on the E string 12th fret. So that's just a cool little technique, and again, you hear how aggressive that sounds, as opposed to just bending. Just has a really, really cool sound. And again, it's just one note, but it's just one way of bending that a lot of people don't do often. So now, this second idea that Shane used to do were these cool little, again, those quick bends, but he used to do them down in patterns of, say, a pentatonic scale. So he'd do... Right, so that's just going the pentatonic scale. And there's a lot of distortion and gain for me, but... So A minor pentatonic, right? And instead of playing the 8th fret there, the C note there on the 8th fret of the E string, you play it on the, you're moving down a position basically, so you're on the 3rd fret of the A string. So you have, so you can get these patterns, right? And he's basically just taking the first note of each one and getting maybe a pinch harmonic there, and he's bending up and down quick and then bending slowly into the pitch. Right? Just another cool way of using that type of bend and just getting a really great rock aggressive sound. All right, so this next idea, we're going to drift away from the rock thing a little bit more down to earth into the blues realm. We're going to clean up the tone a little bit, use a little less gain. But guys like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix, this is one of the techniques they would use to add that aggression to their playing. It's a really cool bending technique. Takes a little practice to get it to work together, but it's basically you're letting 2 strings bleed together. So the way they would do it, instead of just letting them ring together at the same time, they would actually bend one up, grab the string on the grab the note on the next string, and then bend it down. So you'd have, we'll stick in the E minor pentatonic, right, the 12th fret, and you're going to bend the D note on the 15th fret of the B string. You're going to bend that up a whole step to an E note, right? But when you're up there, you're going to grab the G string and then bend that down. But you're going to let the 2 of those ring together as you're bending it down. So it's the 15th fret on both the B and the G string. But you hit 1 first, the B string, bend that up, then grab the G string, 15th fret, and bend that down. And if you see that time, I stopped, once I grabbed the G string, I stopped the B string with my finger here, my picking finger. And you get that separation. So sometimes you can do that. And that sounds really cool because you get this up-down, wishy-washy feel. But to get a little more aggression, you let those 2 ring together. Right? And you can do it even more aggressive, like, right? Just sounds really, really cool. Again, very simple technique. Take it all over the fretboard and just experiment with bending 1 string up and then into another. Then you grab that note and just see how that works out for you. It's a really, really cool technique. All right, so the last technique we're going to touch on is an idea that you probably already know, but these are all concepts that they're very simple to apply, but sometimes we forget to use them because we're wrapped up in all the other learning the licks and all that kind of stuff. Well, this is volume swells. Now, a lot of people do volume swells. And all you're doing basically is hitting the note while the volume on your guitar is off. Then you roll the volume on. And you want to usually add a little bit of vibrato, because if you don't, still sounds cool, but adding a little vibrato sounds really, really cool. But now when you add some bends to that, right? It just has a really cool ethereal kind of effect to it. Another thing you can do, again, is combine the 2 things. There were all really clean bends. Right? But now, what if you bend 2 strings together? Right? But make sure you hit it first without the volume. Just gets a really cool thing happen. Or you could bend one into the other and then strike it. So probably pretty simple concepts that anybody could figure out, but it's one of those things that we kind of forget about along the way of exploring some more difficult, like picking techniques or legato techniques. Well, these things are all really easy to use, and they're just musical. And And also, one last thing, try bending the note first. Instead of bending into the pitch, try bending the pitch first, pick the note, and then turn the volume on, and then bend down. So it's... right, so it's like the reverse bend, but you don't hear it bending into the pitch. So there's a ton of little tiny concepts and ideas to help you get a little more aggression or get a different sound out of the guitar than maybe you're currently using. So hope you guys really enjoyed that. If you did like this, please subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're on TrueFire, or even if you're not, go to TrueFire and vote for this lesson if you do like it. I really appreciate it. And we will see you next week with a lot more cool bending techniques.